Ride the wild wind. Hey, 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 hey.
Welcome everyone to the very first episode of Ride the Wild Wind, where we're going to be talking about anything and everything to make wind energy more profitable. In this podcast series, we're going to be hosting a variety of experts from the different parts of the wind energy value chain. And today, as our first guest, we have Teemu Vekkeli with us. Teemu, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bora. Happy to be here, first episode and all.
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure to have you. So, Teemu, you have a great wealth of experience under your belt. You have close to 20 years of experience in the wind energy space, both onshore and offshore. Your specialty areas in asset management and operations and maintenance, but you've also held different positions from the different parts of the project life cycle, going all the way from the initial development to project management, quality assurance, and as I said, all the way to post-commissioning operations and maintenance. And you've also been involved in training of engineers and technicians who might be new to the industry as well. So as a first guest, I think we're going to be leveraging and talking about that experience quite a bit today. Did I leave anything out, Teemu, or is that pretty much it?
No, I think that's the short version of or a summary of my experience over the years. So yeah, I've been happy to have worked on various roles in various organizations, more on always on the engineering side of things, but yeah, have had the opportunity to become familiar with commercial and legal aspects of things as well.
And I guess that kind of forms the overall topic of what we're going to be talking about today, which is the importance of real world experience and technical knowledge and how they impact the commercial outcomes of any of the wind energy projects. So with that, I kind of want to get right into it. And leveraging from your wealth of experience, I want you to go back in your career and can you think of specific examples of where this technical knowledge or real world experience became really handy and actually turned into a positive outcome commercially for the project you were involved in?
Yeah, certainly. What I sort of advocate from my end is the whole connection from operations and maintenance experience onto to project development and contract negotiations for both turbine supply, but then also the long-term service agreements. So looking at things like warranties, guarantees, availability, response times, but then also stuff that's not so obvious necessarily, such as data access and analytics. So feeding that into the contract negotiations, making sure that the contract clauses align with what's going on in the real world, making sure that the asset owner is also the owner of all the information generated by their turbines, for example, and has the authority to decide, okay, who does what with which parts of the system. So all that comes into play, and yeah, it's front loading the project development because obviously there's very limited opportunities once any contract has been signed to start renegotiating or trying to improve one's position with regards to whatever was initially signed into contract.
All right, so you've actually lived through that period where in the industry in the earlier days, the value of data wasn't very much appreciated. So the asset owners were not that adamant about including in the contract that they should have access to data. But over time, as people realize that, oh my God, there's a lot of value in this data and I need to have access to it, then it kind of became a standard in the industry because now people realize they could use it for, improving the commercial positioning of the project. Is that right?
Yeah, indeed. So obviously, from a project developer point of view, the main focus is, of course, on delivery and completion. But there's a lot of things that come into play once that project has entered into service. So it's one of those lessons learned.
Yep. And during your experience, you've also held positions where you actually had a P&L responsibility. And I'm kind of curious. It's sometimes difficult to get the right balance when you have P&L responsibility, focusing on things that you need right now to ensure operational excellence versus allocating, time and resources and money and so forth for some of the things that are of more strategic nature that have a longer term impact. Can you give some highlights on, or maybe some pointers or tips on how that balance can be found?
So years ago, I've been managing service organizations, and with that responsibility in mind, yeah, it's always has to do with well, like I said, front loading a lot of the decisions, making sure that those people making the final decisions on budgets and business outcomes are also involved, and making sure that those people are informed about the sort of technical aspects that they might not necessarily recognize to begin with. So yeah, front loading contracts, front loading budgets, making sure that everybody is informed of the other decisions that they need to make.
Yeah, so front loading budgets, front loading schedules, that's easier said than done though, isn't it? Because, what happens is everybody's under pressure to get the project across the finish line, and the budgets, there are always constraints on it. So how do you make sure that all happens? Like within the organization, how do you get everybody aligned, all the key stakeholders aligned, and make sure they're on board?
Yeah, well, it's a lot to do with collaboration, um, being an advocate for the engineering and operational stages pretty much consistently within the organization, and making sure everybody's aligned in that respect.
Okay. All right. So you're one of these unique people that has experience in both onshore and offshore wind. So I kind of want to take advantage of that and ask you about the different parts of onshore and offshore. So offshore, obviously, it's a much more demanding environment. The stakes are much higher. Every percentage point of improvement or degradation has a much bigger consequence in terms of absolute values. And there's obviously a lot of and growing interest in offshore, which is a bit of a newer industry compared to onshore as well. So, considering the fact that it's a bit of a newer industry as well, these things about some of the things we spoke about a minute ago, taking the learnings from real world and applying to commercial and contractual aspects of it, how does that play out in the offshore world, and how's that different from the onshore world?
Yeah, yeah. In the end, yeah, as you mentioned, offshore has its own set of complexities and scale. But yeah, in the end, the technology involved in the turbine itself is pretty much the same, whether it's onshore or offshore. And obviously there's a lot of similarities, a lot of potential to implement lessons learned in that respect. Yeah, obviously offshore logistics plays an even larger part in any operation, and that's something to take into account when you plan for any eventualities.
Okay. When I was looking at your LinkedIn profile some time ago when we kind of first met, one of the things that really stood out is you make a point of saying you make decisions in a data-driven way or fact-based way as opposed to hearsay, which can be a real problem in the industry. And that's obviously data is at the very core of what we do at Kavaken as well. So that's one of the reasons I think we connected really well. And the industry is growing and realizing that there is more value to be had from using data. But I think there's still some room to grow there in terms of the industry. And I kind of want to ask you, do you feel that there is a particular source of or type of data that the industry is not leveraging enough? And if we were to leverage it, we could generate a lot more value from it. Can you think of any specific examples like that?
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm happy to see in the last few years, well, let's say 5 to 10 years, uh, there's been a lot more emphasis on data and analyzing operations. Obviously, condition monitoring systems have been existing for years before that. And that's, I think, the first thing that came to everybody's attention. But yeah, like as it stands, there's a lot of, yeah, in the SCADA, for example, there's a lot of values that can be utilized to monitor the performance. What I see the least right now is actually looking at the SCADA system, the turbine parameters, and seeing what kind of changes have been implemented there during the operation. So let's say some kind of service event takes place and an engineer adjusts some parameters of the controller. Right now, that's not really visible to the end user or the asset owner, but it provides a wealth of information on, okay, what's happened, what's been done, how it can be useful in the future, and things like that. So that's probably the most underutilized feature, parameters.
I think that's an excellent example, Teemu. And why do you think parameters haven't been utilized as much? What's in the way of utilizing them even more?
Well, it's something that's more embedded inside the system. You cannot easily read it via common interfaces. But of course, it is available in the SCADA system itself and in the turbine controller. And nowadays, you start to see more technology geared towards accessing the controller itself rather than just reading an interface. So it's of course a positive thing.
Okay, so what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is it's not a contractual issue per se that the parameters, the data around parameters or information isn't made available to asset owners, but it's more of a technical or integration issue that's preventing that from being utilized more. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Firstly, contractually, the asset owner needs to be guaranteed access to all parts of their system. Once that's established, then from there on, obviously, it's a technical solution to be able to access that information. That's little bit more hidden inside the system.
Okay, I see. So what you're saying is that maybe it's going to take a little more time for that parameter data to become available as well, kind of like how typical SCADA data wasn't available in the earlier days, but now it's kind of like a standard in the industry.
Yeah, indeed. It might take a while. I'm not saying it's going to take long, but it might take a while.
Okay, all right, I know what you mean. So when I was speaking about your experience, part of it, which is quite interesting actually, to me at least, is how you dealt with training of engineers and technicians in the industry. So having been in the industry for close to 20 years and having seen different parts of the energy value chain, if you were to come across a new person looking to enter the industry as an engineer, technician, or whatever, what is the one problem you would suggest that they focus on that can deliver value to them, but also to the industry?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, obviously, people coming in with an industrial maintenance background, I think they're pretty well covered, considering like mechanical, electrical maintenance. Yeah, there's some parts, yeah, especially regards to SCADA control systems, communication, things like that are maybe not so popular nowadays. I don't know. And, but then, of course, like, yeah, that's more for the people doing the day-to-day service work, for, let's say, engineers, upcoming asset managers, people in those kinds of positions. Obviously, good to understand the environment that these turbines operate in, yeah, whether that be onshore, but especially offshore, and understand the challenges of logistics, understand the challenges of access, and the things around that. I think engineering, especially degree qualified engineers nowadays, I think they have a pretty good background. And wind and renewables is being taught more in schools than what it was 20 years ago, universities as well. So, yeah. if anyone wants to look into those kinds of things from a study perspective, I think there's plenty of jobs to go around.
All right, definitely. And looking at the pace the industry is growing, I think we all agree that we want it to grow faster. And in order for that to happen, this knowledge sharing is quite important. So, being in a relatively new industry, the more wealth of knowledge that we can share and spread across the industry, obviously more rapidly the development's going to happen, because we see it with a lot of our clients as well. It's sometimes knowledge is very much individualized, so it's very individual based. Even within the same company, the different operational farms, the people responsible for them could have different levels of knowledge and experience, and it doesn't get spread out that well. But you are quite active in this scene of knowledge sharing. You attend a lot of the forums that are there where asset owners come together. So I was wondering, do you have any, again, pointers, some tips or suggestions to people who are in the industry and are hungry for learning more? What type of media, what type of forums, what type of environments would you recommend that they take part in so they can increase their overall level of knowledge?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Many of those forums and conferences. Of course, there's a lot of structured discussion going on, but it's also about building the personal connection between peers in the industry. So other asset managers, other engineering managers, people like that. Um, Even if you're not necessarily faced with an issue at that time of any conference, there's always somebody who you can go back to. Hey, I know this guy from before. He talked about a lot of these stuff, and it's always a good reference. But all in all, those kinds of events usually have a pretty good atmosphere and very open, honest discussions about issues regarding particular turbine platforms or technologies, for example, and it really brings value to be able to access that knowledge and sort of create an industry-wide body of knowledge.
Yeah, and actually, that is one of my favorite things about this industry. It's this. There is a sense of camaraderie. Like, we're all in this together. We're not really in competition, particularly the asset owners. We're not really in competition, but it's kind of like this camaraderie where we're in this together and we're gonna make improvements in the industry as a whole. And I really do like that about this industry. But as we get close to the end of this podcast, I want to ask you, that's a good thing about the industry. What is the one thing that you don't like about the industry?
Okay, yeah, yeah. Like, well, I have to agree with you, and the sort of camaraderie of the people who are inside the industry is an awesome thing. What I like the least maybe is then the discussion around the fringes of the industry and the people who are not involved talking about made up, yeah, things around environmental aspects or, yeah, wildlife or whatever that, yeah, obviously not based on any reality, but just somebody's opinion that they're not really able to justify anything else. But okay, I guess that's the same for anything nowadays. But that would be the thing I like the least.
All right, so things getting blown out of proportion, maybe by people who should know better or are not really qualified to make some statements. Is that a good way of saying it?
Exactly, and well, obviously, then media as well exaggerating these kinds of fringe opinions. But okay.
Okay. All right. That's great. Excellent example. A good response. And I kind of like ending with the thing that we don't like, because it gives us room for thinking about how we can improve it in the future. So I think that's a good way to end our podcast series. With that said, Teemu, any final words you'd like to share with the audience here?
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, thank you for having me, Bora. And yeah, for anybody looking to join the industry, yeah, there's a lot of resources nowadays available. Like I said, a lot of opportunities to study, which weren't there 20 years ago. And yeah, like I said, the camaraderie within the industry is pretty remarkable. I haven't seen that in other places. And yeah.
Well, Teemu, thanks again for joining us. It was a pleasure having you. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching the first episode of Ride the Wild Wind. We look forward to seeing you again in our next episode where we're going to be tackling yet another interesting problem to make wind energy more profitable. Thanks again and have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.